Technical characteristics of the Devoitin D.520 aircraft. Engine, Hispano-Suiza HS-12Y45. Power, HP, 930. Wingspan, m, 10.20. Length of aircraft, m, 8.70. Height of the aircraft, m, 2,57. Wing area, square m, 16,00. Weight, kg. Empty aircraft, 2075. Takeoff weight, 2,760. Maximal speed, km/h. On the ground, 425. At an altitude of 5,500 m, 535. Time of climb, min. 4,000, 5 feet 49 inches. 6,000, 8 feet 39 inches. Ceiling, m, 10,250. Flight range, km, 890. Devoitin D.520. Creation history. Having built a successful D.500/501/510 fighter family in the early 30s, Devoitin had every reason to count on winning the new contest announced by the French Aviation Ministry in 1934. However, the D.513, which was an extension of that family, but with retractable landing gear and a closed cockpit, lost the competition to a competitor, the MiS 405. The conclusions were drawn from the defeat, and in June 1936 Devoitin began to develop a new fighter with considerably better flying characteristics. As it turned out, just in time, the French Air Force, under the influence of the first results of Hurricane and Spitfire tests, announced a new competition for a fighter capable of speeds of at least 500 km per hour. But because of the lack of government funding, most of the money was allocated to mass production of the MiS 406, the first of 3 prototypes. The D.520.01, with a HS-12Y21 engine, 900 HP, did not enter the field until October 2, 1938. The speed was much lower than expected, only 470 km per hour. The next prototypes were equipped with more powerful engines, the radiators were redesigned to reduce drag, and the keel area was increased to improve stability. Thanks to this, the speed of D.520.03 reached 535 km per hour. The 20mm cannon and 2 7.5mm machine guns in the underwing canopies were mounted on the second prototype. In April of 1939 an order for the first batch of 200 new fighters, deliverable by December of 1939, was issued, which was soon increased to 710 aircraft. However, because of problems with finishing the still raw HS-12Y45 engine, the first production aircraft did not take off until November 2, 1939, and by the end of the year the Air Force received only 19 machines. By the time of the French surrender, the volume of orders reached 2,200 aircraft and the number of those built reached 438. Total production, including deliveries to the Vichy Air Force and the Luftwaffe, but excluding prototypes, was 905 aircraft. Basic modifications of the Devoitin D.520. D.520C1, the only variant built in series. HS-12Y45 engine, 910 HP. Armament, 20mm HS-404 cannon, 60 rounds, 4 7.5mm wing machine guns, 500 rounds each. Produced until the end of June of 1940, then production was resumed, with permission of Germany, in August of 1941 and continued for the Vichy Air Force, and then for Luftwaffe until June of 1944. From 1942 the engine HS-12Y49 with improved high-altitude characteristics was installed. D.520DC, the 2-seat training version. In 1945 to 1946 21 aircraft were converted. D.521 version with English engine Merlin, 1030 HP, an armament of 2 20mm guns in the wing. D.523 with HS-12Y51 engine, 1500 HP, D.524 with HS-12Z89. It was supposed to produce D.522 with an American V1710C15, 1040 HP, engine, but not even a prototype was built. The next evolution of the aircraft was to be the D.520Z, SE.520Z, with a HS-12Z89 Tur engine, 1600 HP, an armament of two 20mm cannons and two 7.5mm machine guns in the wing. The prototype was tested since late 1941, but the mass production did not started. Combat use of the Devoitin D.520. Deliveries of D.520C1S to combat units began in late January 1940. Group GCI-3 was the first to receive them, but it did not reach combat readiness until May 7. By May 10, it was the only combat-ready D.520C1 unit in the French Air Force. By then the customer had only accepted 76 war machines. By the end of the month, two groups with D.520C1S were fighting at the front, and in June 3 more joined them. By the time the surrender occurred, two more Air Force groups and four naval air units had been rearmed. During the campaigns of May-June 1940, D.520 pilots scored 108 confirmed air victories. In the clash with Messerschmitts, the new Devoitin performed quite well, slightly inferior to the Bf 109 in speed and rate of climb near the ground, but superior to it in agility and rate of climb at high altitudes. Its win-loss ratio in air combat was 7.7:1, better than that of any other French fighter. However, including aircraft destroyed on the ground, crashed in accidents, and abandoned in retreat, the French lost 106 D.520s. The Vichy Air Force originally had 5 groups armed with the Devoitin D.520s. There was also one naval aviation squadron with the same aircraft, a total of 175 machines. They were all stationed in North Africa. In the spring of 1941, the German authorities authorized the resumption of production of the D.520. It was to become the sole type of fighter in the Vichy Air Force, replacing all other machines. In May-June 1941, Groups 3/GC6 and 2/GC3, as well as Marine Squadron 1AC, were redeployed to Syria, where they fought the British Air Force. With 30 confirmed victories, the units operating the D.520 lost 40 of their aircraft in Syria. By the fall of 1942, 6 more D.520s had been rearmed in the Vichy Air Force. By November 1, 1942, there were 235 of these fighters in southern France, 169 in North Africa, and another 30 in Senegal. When the Allied landings in North Africa began on November 8, the French Air Force attempted to resist, achieving several air victories. In particular, the devotees of GC3/3 near Oran shot down 12 British planes. However, the French did not succeed in preventing the landing. The planes that had been in France were captured by Germany in early November 1942. The German spoils were about 250 D.520s, including those still in the factory. The Luftwaffe later ordered 300 more D.520s to French companies. There was no talk about using these planes at the front, but they were used by fighter training squadrons, JG 101 and 105 in France and JG 103 in Austria. The Devoitin was not particularly popular. It was considered excessively sensitive in control. On the one hand, you could control the machine literally, with 2 fingers, in flight, but on the other hand, pilots accustomed to more rigid aircraft found it very difficult to get used to the Devoitin. In the training squadrons of fighter squadrons during the year crashed 111 machines of this type. 66 D.520s were received by Italy, 36 were captured in November 1942 in southern France, and 30 were received in 1943 from Germany. The Devoitins were the first combat units to receive the 8th and 22nd groups in February 1943, and then several more units. Due to its cannon armament, the D.520 was considered by the Italians a specialized fighter against heavy bombers. In the autumn of 1943, 3 planes were listed in the Italian Social Republic's Air Force, but were used only as training aircraft. In the summer of 1943, Bulgaria received a significant number of D.520s, 100, and according to other sources 120. They were used in the air defense system to intercept American bombers that attacked the oil fields in Romania. In 1944, the Devotins were largely replaced by Bf-109gs, but in the 6th Eagle Regiment, they continued in service right up to the end of the war. A few surviving aircraft served in the Bulgarian Air Force until 1947. After the Allied landings in France, some of the D.520s serving with the Luftwaffe rejoined the French Air Force, as well as the Devotins that had survived in North Africa. In the last months of the war, they were used as ground attack aircraft by GCBI-18. After the war, the French Air Force flew about 40 D.520s for training purposes, about half of which were converted to the 2-seat variant. Despite their many children's illnesses, constant engine overheating, unreliable supercharger performance, and frequent weapons failures, D-520 fighters quickly won acclaim from pilots thanks to their excellent maneuverability, comfortable cockpit with a good glassed canopy, and good takeoff and landing characteristics. For its graceful, beautiful silhouette, the D.520 was nicknamed Miss France. Alas, the plane was too late in serial production.